I thought I knew exactly where I stood at my job, that I had earned every bit of respect, every dollar, every nod of approval from my managers, until the Friday before Christmas in Los Angeles, when I opened the final year-end bonus email and realized my name wasn't on the list. 15 of the highest performers got their bonuses. Everyone but me. And that's when it hit me. They hid it. They hid my bonus. I stared at my laptop for a full minute, the skyline of downtown Los Angeles glowing faintly through my office window, holiday lights reflecting off the glass, and I couldn't believe it. I had hit every target this year, sold over 120 units of our limited edition leather jackets just in October alone, managed the social media campaigns that brought in over $350 in revenue, and yet, nothing. My heart thumped in that quiet open space office while the rest of the team murmured and laughed at the holiday party I had helped organize the day before, completely unaware of what was happening to me. I felt that familiar knot of frustration in my stomach, the kind that comes from knowing you've been cheated but also knowing you're not powerless. My mom's text lit up my phone. Money isn't as important as justice and pride, baby girl. I read it 3 times. Her words were like a lifeline, reminding me that this wasn't just about a paycheck. It was about standing for myself, standing for every other woman, every other Black girl who's been overlooked in corporate America. I sat back in my chair, hands clutching the edge of the desk, and let that anger simmer. Not blind rage, not impulsive fire, but the kind of focused, simmering determination that could fuel a revolution in a cubicle. I remembered the days when I would stay late after everyone left, meticulously checking inventory, double-checking every sales report, making sure the models were photographed just right for the Instagram campaigns that generated thousands of clicks. I remembered my manager's casual praise, the subtle compliments, the occasional nod when I presented a campaign idea to the creative team of 7. And yet, none of that translated into the reward I had earned. The more I thought about it, the more it felt personal, like someone had drawn a line in the sand and told me I wasn't supposed to cross it. I could almost hear the whispers of the office walls, the quiet side glances when I passed, the way certain emails would mysteriously disappear from my inbox, the tiny injustices that everyone ignores until one day they stack so high you can't ignore them anymore. That's when I realized this wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. And I would not let it slide. I took a deep breath, thinking about the mentorship circle I had started, the young interns I had guided, the messages from former colleagues who had tagged me in posts saying, "You always deserve the recognition, Amiyah." I felt a surge of clarity. This was my moment, and I was going to take control. I opened my email history, began scanning through every thread, every chat, every attachment that mentioned bonuses, performance targets, numbers, and approvals. I noted every discrepancy, every inconsistency in payroll sheets, every casual mention in Slack channels that hinted at favoritism. I could almost see the story unfold in front of me, a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to the truth. The office buzzed around me, Christmas decorations sparkling in the fluorescent light, coworkers laughing about secret Santa gifts, the scent of Starbucks peppermint lattes filling the air. And in that chaos, I was laser-focused. I pictured myself on the phone with HR, poised and professional, backed by evidence, ready to demand what was rightfully mine. I imagined the manager's smug face when I calmly laid it out, proof in hand, every email time-stamped, every number verified. And for the first time that day, a small smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. This wasn't just about the money. It was about showing that I knew my worth, that I would not be invisible, that the lessons my mother had instilled in me, integrity, courage, pride were not just words. They were armor. I thought about the 15 other high performers who had received their bonuses, some of them friends, some of them not, and I made a silent promise. I wasn't going to let them get away with this, but I wasn't going to make it about revenge. I was going to make it about justice. I envisioned the path ahead, messy but precise. Gather evidence, confront carefully, involve the right people, and if necessary, broadcast the truth in a way that no one could ignore. I ran through the scenarios in my head, imagining the camera angles, the lighting, the tone of voice I would use, the exact phrasing that would command attention without losing composure. I knew this was bigger than me. It was a statement, a stand against the subtle, everyday injustices that Black women face in corporate spaces. And in that moment, sitting in my office chair as the afternoon sun dipped behind the skyscrapers of downtown LA, I felt a shift. Fear was still there. Sure, a low hum in my chest, but determination drowned it out. This was my fight, and I was ready. I checked my calendar. 48 hours until the year-end review. 48 hours to turn invisibility into visibility, to turn silence into power. I clenched my fists, leaned back, and whispered to myself, "Let's do this." Would you walk away or fight back? Tell me in the comments. I thought I had seen everything, but nothing prepared me for what I would discover when I started digging. Because the truth isn't always written on a spreadsheet. It's hidden in whispers, in little corners, in messages nobody thinks anyone else is reading. I started my investigation the Monday after discovering my missing bonus, the smell of fresh coffee still lingering in the air of our open space office on Wilshire Boulevard, sunlight spilling across the polished hardwood floors. My desk was cluttered with reports, charts, and sticky notes, but my mind was laser-focused. I opened Slack, scrolling through every conversation, every thread that mentioned bonus, year-end, or performance. I copied emails, screenshots, every casual mention of money, every sly comment that hinted at favoritism. That's when I stumbled on it. A message from my manager to HR, sent late on a Friday evening, just as everyone was leaving for the holiday weekend. Make sure Amiyah's bonus isn't processed. She doesn't need to know. I froze. The words blurred in front of me, disbelief mixing with rage. They weren't just forgetting me. They were hiding it. My hands shook as I read it again, then again. I could feel the walls closing in around me, the hum of the office suddenly deafening. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I knew the power of patience, the strength of preparation. I leaned back, took a deep breath, and reminded myself of my mom's words. Justice over money, pride over fear. That sentence anchored me, reminded me that I had to be strategic, that this was bigger than anger. It was about truth. Over the next few hours, I quietly reached out to a couple of trusted colleagues, 2 women, both Black, both in my mentorship circle. We met at a small cafe on 7th Street, the one with the green awning and the smell of baked bread that always made me feel like anything was possible. I slid into the corner booth, laptop open, voice barely above a whisper. "I need your help," I said, showing them the screenshot. Their eyes widened, then narrowed with determination. "We've seen this before," one of them said. "It's subtle. They hide numbers, redirect bonuses, play favorites. But you're not invisible. We'll find the trail." Together, we started piecing things together like detectives on a high-stakes case. Payroll records from the past 2 years, spreadsheets, bonus matrices, performance reviews, every tiny discrepancy became a clue. I noticed patterns, Names repeated in certain projects, specific managers giving extra credit to their favorites, bonuses landing in accounts that didn't reflect the actual numbers achieved. I ran the calculations, double-checked formulas, and my heart raced as I realized just how deliberate it was. We were in a war of numbers, and I was holding the map. I dug into historical data, quarterly targets, social media campaign results, sales numbers. Everything pointed to the fact that I had not only met, but exceeded every goal. One campaign alone, our December limited edition boots, had brought in over $200, US in revenue, and the customer engagement metrics I had personally monitored had increased Instagram interactions by 34%. Yet somehow, the bonuses had been rerouted, hidden behind layers of administrative errors. Every piece of evidence made me more determined, every small discovery a step closer to reclaiming what was mine. I began to rehearse conversations in my head, imagining how I would present this information to HR, how I would remain calm but assertive, every word chosen for maximum clarity and impact. I also kept thinking about my mom, who had taught me to be proud of who I am, to never back down in the face of injustice. And then came the biggest breakthrough. A fellow colleague, Malik, who had been quietly observing the same manager's patterns for years, pulled me aside. "They think you won't notice," he said, leaning against the break room counter, coffee in hand. "They hide the numbers, they play the favorites, but you've got receipts. And when you show them, trust me, they'll have nowhere to run." I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was true. I had the receipts. I had the evidence. And more importantly, I had control. I spent that evening cross-referencing every spreadsheet, lining up emails with performance metrics, and creating a single master document that told the story. My performance, my numbers, my results, all pointing to the one undeniable truth. I had earned my bonus, and there was no justification for it being withheld. The city lights of Los Angeles twinkled outside my apartment window as I reviewed it one last time. I could almost see the narrative unfolding, a cinematic sequence in my mind. Me walking into the office the next day, evidence in hand, calm, confident, unstoppable. But before I could move forward, I needed more confirmation. I quietly approached another colleague, Tasha, who managed one of our smaller but highly profitable accounts. Over a quiet lunch at a diner on Santa Monica Boulevard, I casually brought up bonuses, asking her how her team was rewarded this year. She hesitated, glanced around, then whispered, "They tried to hide mine too, but I got lucky. I know what they're doing with yours." Her words, hushed but loaded, confirmed everything. This wasn't a mistake. This was systemic. And now I had allies. I began to visualize my plan in precise detail. Which conversations to have, which emails to forward, which documents to compile into a single undeniable package. I imagined the CEO's office, the tension, the stifled whispers from coworkers, the subtle shift in energy when someone finally stood up for themselves in a space that had tried to overlook them. I knew fear would be present, as it always is when you challenge authority, but I also knew that courage, intelligence, and preparation could turn that fear into power. That night, I stayed at my desk until the streetlights outside flickered and the city quieted down. I had traced every thread, mapped every hidden transfer, cataloged every instance of favoritism, and lined up my allies. I was ready. The truth was now fully in my hands. And for the first time, a real sense of control washed over me, a thrill of anticipation that only comes when you know you have the upper hand. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and whispered to myself, They may have tried to hide it, but they forgot one thing. I don't just work here. I see everything. Sevens. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that inspire and empower. I realized then that knowing the truth wasn't enough. If I wanted my bonus, if I wanted justice, I had to move like a chess master, every step precise, every word calculated, and every eye on me unaware of what was coming. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers of downtown Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the office floor, I sat at my small apartment desk in Koreatown, laptop open, notebooks scattered around me, coffee cooling in a mug that read, "Boss Energy." I could feel the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me, but instead of fear, there was clarity. I knew I had allies, Malik, Tasha, and one other colleague I trusted implicitly, and together, we had compiled every email, every spreadsheet, every Slack message that proved not only that my bonus had been intentionally hidden, but that there was a pattern of favoritism designed to keep people like me invisible. I opened the master spreadsheet I had spent the last 36 hours organizing. 78 lines of evidence, meticulously numbered and time-stamped. Each entry told a story. Who said what? When it happened? How much revenue I had generated? The exact targets I had exceeded. I could almost hear the hum of the city outside, cars inching through traffic, streetlights flickering on, while inside me, a plan started to form, step by step. The first move, confrontation, but subtle, controlled, like a slow-building wave. I mapped out exactly how I would approach HR, what I would say, in what order, and the tone I would use. Calm, assertive, unshakable. The second move, gather more evidence from secondary sources without drawing attention, including project management logs, past campaign analytics, and internal performance reviews dating back 2 years. Every document, every number had to line up perfectly, because once I made my move, there would be no room for doubt. I even planned the logistics of a potential public disclosure if internal channels failed. I rehearsed speaking directly into a camera, imagining a live stream scenario, walking through the narrative of evidence while keeping my tone professional yet emotionally compelling, ensuring that every person watching, colleagues, executives, the public, would understand not just the injustice, but my calm, methodical approach to correcting it. That night, I rehearsed lines in my bedroom mirror, standing tall, shoulders back, voice steady. This is about more than a bonus. This is about fairness, about accountability, about every person who has been overlooked. The mirror reflected my determination, the shadows of the apartment stretching across the floor, highlighting the fact that the world outside wouldn't wait for anyone who hesitated. Over the next day, I divided tasks among my allies. Malik would discreetly record discrepancies he had observed. Tasha would double-check payroll dates, and I would compile the narrative that would make our case irrefutable. Each of us moved quietly, carefully, aware that any misstep could alert management. I scheduled meetings strategically, booked a small conference room at 3 p.m. knowing it would be empty enough to speak freely but still under official oversight. I even scouted the CEO's calendar online, looking for the perfect window to present our findings if needed, noting the time slots between client calls and department briefings. I wanted to ensure maximum visibility with minimal pushback. The stakes were high: my reputation, my integrity, my livelihood, and I treated every action like a high-stakes chess move. I cross-referenced bonus allocations with project outcomes. December's limited edition boots, 200 units sold generating 210, $100 in revenue, November's Instagram campaign, 34% engagement growth, October's leather jackets, 120 units sold above target. Every figure meticulously documented, every achievement aligned with the corresponding financial proof. By the end of that evening, I had built a digital dossier that was airtight, bulletproof, undeniable. I even considered the psychological aspect. How would management react when confronted? Would they try to intimidate me, charm me, or dismiss me? I crafted language for each scenario, ensuring I could pivot seamlessly, maintaining control, asserting authority without aggression, showing confidence without arrogance. I even ran through potential allies' reactions, rehearsing how to cue them subtly to reinforce my credibility during internal meetings or if the confrontation escalated. There was also a personal element. My family. I pictured my mother, sitting in her living room in South Central LA, smiling through worry and pride, knowing I was acting not only for myself, but for every lesson she had ever taught me about courage, dignity, and standing firm. That image strengthened me, sharpened my focus, and reminded me that every small action, every meticulous note, every late-night spreadsheet was part of a larger story, a story about integrity, resilience, and unapologetic ambition. I set milestones for myself. By Tuesday morning, all evidence compiled and cross-verified. By Tuesday afternoon, preliminary discussions with HR. By Wednesday, formal confrontation with management. And by Thursday, if necessary, a controlled public disclosure through a private live stream that would document the truth without sensationalism, focusing solely on clarity, evidence, and personal narrative. I even prepared contingencies. What if emails were lost? What if managers denied authorship? What if HR tried to stall? I created backup copies of all documents, timestamps, screenshots, and even prepared visual graphs to show revenue versus bonus allocations, highlighting discrepancies in a way that could not be ignored. By late Wednesday night, after a marathon of preparation, my living room looked like a war room. Sticky notes lined the walls, color-coded by priority. My laptop screens glowed with spreadsheets, chat logs, email threads. Coffee cups and half-eaten snacks littered the floor. I leaned back, letting exhaustion mingle with exhilaration. I felt the weight of the coming confrontation, but also an unshakable confidence. I had done everything possible to prepare, to control every variable, to anticipate every move. I whispered to myself, they may have tried to hide it, but they forgot one thing. I see everything, and I am ready. I even rehearsed the emotional aspect, how to remain composed yet emotionally resonant, to convey authority while still eliciting empathy, to show strength without arrogance. By Thursday morning, I was ready. The dossier was complete, allies briefed, strategies mapped, contingencies in place. I could feel the subtle electricity in the air as I walked into the office, the city lights fading behind the buildings, a new day dawning. Everything had led to this moment. Every late night, every detail painstakingly documented, every ally recruited, every scenario rehearsed, all converged into one precise, unstoppable strategy. I knew fear would be present, but preparation transformed it into power. I could almost feel the tension of the office, the whispers of colleagues, the faint hum of the elevators, the subtle shift in atmosphere as management sensed something different about me, poised, calm, in control. And deep down, I smiled, knowing that the next moves would not just reclaim my bonus, but redefine how I stood in that space, unshaken, unyielding, unstoppable. I had set the pieces, controlled the board, and now The game was about to begin. Talk to me. What's your take on this? Sevens. I thought I was ready before, but nothing could prepare me for the look on their faces when I finally walked into that room, dossier in hand, knowing every lie they had told would crumble in front of everyone. Thursday morning arrived with a crisp chill in the Los Angeles air, sunlight streaming into our open space office on Wilshire Boulevard, bouncing off the polished floors and glass walls. I carried my laptop bag heavier than usual, not because of its contents, but because of the weight of certainty, preparation, and unshakable focus. I had spent 2 full days meticulously organizing every piece of evidence, 92 emails, 45 Slack messages, payroll sheets spanning 2 years, screenshots of bonus allocations that clearly highlighted discrepancies, all compiled into a visually compelling infographic that told the story without words. Numbers, patterns, and accountability laid bare. As I walked past the reception, I could feel eyes on me, colleagues sensing that something was different, a shift in energy. My pulse was steady, my shoulders back, my steps measured. I stepped into the small conference room on the 22nd floor, where HR and my manager were waiting, their smiles polite but tinged with superiority, the kind of superiority that thinks it can intimidate without knowing the storm about to hit. I set my laptop on the table, clicked open the presentation, and felt a subtle electricity fill the room. The slides projected onto the screen. Line by line, chart by chart, the evidence unfolded. I didn't start with accusations. I started with numbers, facts, and results. Over the past 12 months, I've managed social campaigns that increased engagement by 34%, exceeded sales targets on limited edition boots by 200 units, generating over $210, $1 in revenue. Here's a record of my bonuses versus the approved allocations, I said calmly, pointing to the first chart, a clear visual of where my bonus had been withheld. I watched their expressions tighten, smiles faltering. My manager leaned forward, voice low, almost a whisper. Are you sure about these numbers? I nodded, steady. Every line is time-stamped, every email cross-referenced. These aren't assumptions, they're facts. The HR director shifted in her chair, clearing her throat, and I noticed subtle glances exchanged, the kind of looks that tell you the story is bigger than expected. I didn't stop there. I unveiled the pattern, showing not just my missing bonus, but the systemic favoritism across multiple departments. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need theatrics. The infographic spoke for itself, clean, sharp, undeniable. I watched as colleagues peeked through the glass wall outside, drawn to the unusual meeting. A few joined silently, standing behind me, nodding, sending tiny signals of solidarity, my allies, subtle but powerful. It wasn't a live stream, it wasn't social media, but it was even more electric. A live, internal, undeniable exposure that rippled through the company in real time. My manager's face went pale, his usual smug confidence replaced by tension. He tried to interject, to charm, to dismiss, but I had anticipated every tactic. I calmly guided the room through the sequence. Here's the discrepancy, here's the evidence, and here's the impact on performance, revenue, and morale. Every word measured, every slide reinforcing the truth. HR was quiet, taking notes, visibly uncomfortable but unable to deny what they saw. And then came the unspoken moment. A colleague, Jamal, stepped forward, subtly nodding in agreement, whispering, "I've seen this too." Another colleague, Maya, tapped the slide showing favoritism patterns and whispered, "I can vouch for this." The room shifted. The balance of power had tipped. It was no longer me alone against them. It was me backed by evidence, by allies, by truth itself. My manager tried to regain control, raising his voice slightly, but I maintained eye contact, unwavering. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to show the truth and request what is rightfully mine. Every line of this data is verifiable, every source traceable. Let's correct this. There was a long pause, almost cinematic in its silence, broken only by the soft hum of the projector and the distant sounds of traffic far below. The tension was palpable, thick enough to touch, yet I felt completely calm. I had rehearsed this moment, envisioned every reaction, and controlled every variable. By the time the HR director finally spoke, the words were careful but clear. We need to review this immediately. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. That small acknowledgement felt monumental. The room was charged, colleagues peeking in through glass walls now whispering amongst themselves, realizing that the invisible barrier that had kept me in the shadows was breaking. I left the conference room with a sense of triumph, not arrogance, but quiet power. I had confronted the injustice directly, strategically, with evidence, with allies, and with control. And I knew that the next step, the wider exposure, the undeniable public awareness would follow. My plan was already set. A controlled internal broadcast to the company, accompanied by a visual summary of data, sent via email and Slack, highlighting transparency and accountability without shaming anyone individually. It was my version of a live stream, cinematic, viral within the company first, ensuring that truth could not be ignored and that justice would be visible. I felt my pulse quicken, not with fear, but with exhilaration, knowing that this confrontation was only the first act of a story that would culminate in recognition, correction, and empowerment. Walking back to my desk, I glanced at the skyline, sunlight dancing across the city, and whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning." They wanted to hide it, but I'm showing the world, one undeniable fact at a time. Sevens, thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that inspire and empower. I thought confronting them in that conference room was enough, but nothing could prepare me for the ripple effect that would spread faster than any live stream, faster than any viral post, because truth has a way of reaching every corner when it's undeniable. That Thursday afternoon, after the confrontation, I returned to my desk overlooking the skyline of downtown Los Angeles, sunlight reflecting off the glass towers, city buzzing below. I opened my laptop and prepared the next phase, not a live stream, but something far more strategic. A cinematic, data-driven exposure that would ripple through the company and beyond. I created a short, visually striking video, my voiceover layered over infographics, charts, screenshots, and highlighted emails, a seamless narrative showing how the bonus had been withheld, how performance had been measured, and how favoritism had affected distribution. Each frame was crafted to tell a story without embellishment, numbers and facts speaking louder than accusations. I named the video The Hidden Bonus, Truth Behind the Numbers, and tested it with Malik, Tasha, and Jamal first, each nodding in approval, their expressions a mix of pride and excitement. I scheduled the internal release. An email to every department, the video embedded in Slack, accompanied by a note. Transparency matters. Here's the full context of recent bonus allocations. Please review. Within 30 minutes, colleagues started replying, not with gossip, but with messages of support and verification. I noticed the same thing. One whispered. "Thank you for bringing this to light," another said. I watched the numbers tick upward. Email opens, Slack views, reactions, and felt a quiet thrill. This was organic viral energy, the kind that no one could stage or manipulate. But I didn't stop there. I uploaded the video to the company's official LinkedIn and Instagram pages, framed as a professional transparency case study rather than a personal grievance. The post's reach exploded, colleagues sharing it with exclamation points, hashtags like fairness matters, transparency, justice in the workplace, spreading it beyond the office walls. Within hours, the story had penetrated the wider professional network, receiving hundreds of comments, shares, and messages from other Black women, young professionals, and mentors across Los Angeles, New York, and even Atlanta, who recognized the injustice and applauded the strategic, professional way I handled it. The numbers were staggering. 12,000 views on LinkedIn in the first 4 hours, 500 interactions on Instagram, and dozens of private messages pouring in, encouraging me to keep standing firm. I leaned back in my chair, the city sun now dipping behind the Hollywood hills, and allowed myself a small smile. This wasn't vanity. This was influence, visibility, power. I wasn't just exposing wrongdoing. I was demonstrating how to reclaim it with intelligence and composure. I watched as internal HR and management started responding, the subtle tension in their messages palpable. They had to acknowledge the facts. Ignoring them was no longer an option. My manager sent a terse email asking for a meeting, and I calmly replied, suggesting we discuss corrections and next steps. I felt in control, orchestrating the pace, timing, and narrative. That evening, I received a message from my mother, who had been watching the story unfold from South Central LA. "You are showing them what dignity and strength look like, baby girl. Proud of you." I smiled, feeling a warmth that made every late night, every spreadsheet, every cautious conversation worth it. By Friday morning, the internal and external ripple had become a wave. Executives who previously ignored me were now acknowledging my work. Colleagues who had doubted were now allies. And the office atmosphere shifted. Subtle nods, whispered congratulations, and quiet acknowledgement of my efforts filled the halls. The video had achieved something more powerful than confrontation or emails alone. It had created a shared awareness, a collective recognition, and a momentum that even my manager couldn't stop. And then came the moment I had anticipated. HR scheduled a formal meeting to rectify the bonus allocations. I walked in with my allies, laptop in hand, dossier ready, but the emotional weight was lighter. I had orchestrated the exposure professionally, thoughtfully, and ethically. I wasn't shaming, I was illuminating, empowering, reclaiming what was mine. By noon, the corrections were underway. The missing bonus processed, approvals signed, notifications sent. Colleagues gathered around, congratulating me, sharing small smiles, high fives, and affirmations. The ripple extended beyond the office. Professionals across social media applauding my strategy, messaging to say they'd learned from it, inspired by how a Black woman had navigated corporate challenges with intelligence, courage, and grace. I leaned back by my window, the sun setting over LA's skyscrapers, warm light filling the office, and thought about how far I had come. What started as a hidden bonus had become a lesson in visibility, strategy, and empowerment. I whispered to myself, they tried to hide it, but the truth travels faster than fear, and it always finds its way. That evening, I called my mother. Her voice was trembling with pride and emotion. "You did it. Amiyah, you stood up. You strategized. You showed them. This is bigger than a bonus. This is your legacy. And I knew she was right. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was a statement, a ripple, a movement, proof that preparation, courage, and integrity could turn injustice into empowerment. The city lights of Los Angeles shimmered outside, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe, knowing that justice had been served, the spotlight now firmly on the truth, and my family, my community, and myself, proud and unshakable. You won't believe what happens next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. 7s. I walked into that room thinking I was claiming a bonus, but what I left with was so much more: dignity, respect, and a story that my family, my community, and I would never forget. Friday morning, sunlight spilling across the city streets of downtown Los Angeles filtered through the blinds of the executive conference room on the 22nd floor, and I could feel a tangible energy humming in the air. I arrived early, laptop in hand, dossier neatly tucked, allies subtly by my side. The room smelled of polished wood and faint espresso, and the hum of the air conditioning was the only sound as HR and management shuffled papers, eyes flicking toward me with a mix of apprehension and recognition. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this is it. Every calculation, every chart, every late night, it all leads here. My manager, usually so composed, looked unsettled, lips pressed tight, adjusting his tie as if that could shield him from the inevitability of what was about to happen. I set my laptop on the polished table, opened the document, and projected the infographic that had already gone viral internally, the charts and numbers glowing against the sleek white wall. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The numbers, patterns, and facts did all the talking. Here is what was earned, what was withheld, and what needs correction, I said, calm but unwavering, eyes meeting theirs. HR shuffled papers, nodding, eyes wide, while a few managers from other departments peeked through the glass walls, curiosity and anticipation written plainly across their faces. I watched as my allies, subtly positioned, confirmed details, reinforcing the credibility of every point I presented. Then came the moment, the acknowledgement, that subtle shift from denial to acceptance. HR spoke first. Amiyah, your documentation is thorough, the discrepancies are clear, and corrective actions will begin immediately. My manager tried to speak, but I held up my hand, not in arrogance but in control, signaling the flow, the narrative. Every single number, every chart, every screenshot aligned perfectly, leaving no room for argument. They confirmed not only the missed bonus, but corrected allocations for team members who had been similarly overlooked. The office air seemed to pulse, a quiet reverence as colleagues, observing from behind glass walls or joining in the meeting remotely via the conference system, absorbed the unfolding truth. By noon, confirmations had rolled in, direct deposit updates, bonus corrections, internal emails acknowledging contributions. The $7, $200 bonus that had been hidden was now officially mine, processed, verified, and accounted for. And yet, the numbers were secondary to the victory coursing through me. This was validation, respect, acknowledgement, the culmination of strategy, preparation, and relentless integrity. I left the conference room, stepping onto the wide hallway overlooking the atrium of our building, where sunlight streamed through glass panels, casting a mosaic of light and shadow across the marble floors. Colleagues approached, smiles wide, hands extended, some whispering congratulations, others offering high fives or subtle fist bumps. I could feel the ripple of empowerment spreading. By mid-afternoon, I walked into the small coffee shop across the street, Koreatown humming with the usual energy of commuters, baristas calling out orders, the smell of roasted coffee beans blending with the city. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from colleagues, mentors, friends, and strangers who had seen the internal video and LinkedIn post. "You did it!" Incredible strategy. That was brilliant, professional, and fearless. "You're inspiring us all." Words pouring in, affirmations of a victory larger than money. That evening, I returned home, heart pounding not from stress but from the weight of accomplishment. My mother answered the door before I even knocked, her eyes brimming with tears, her hands reaching for mine. "Amiyah, I saw it. Every single step you took. You showed them. You did it all with dignity. I am so proud of you," she whispered, her voice trembling. And just like that, all the late nights, all the meticulous documentation, all the rehearsals, every sacrifice felt worth it. My father, joining us from the living room, nodded silently, his pride unspoken but palpable. We sat together, sharing the small victory, yet feeling the magnitude of what it represented. Justice, respect, integrity, and the undeniable power of preparation. I reflected on the months of effort, the hidden bonus, the investigation, the confrontation, the internal exposure, the viral response, each step a testament to resilience, strategy, and unwavering focus. And as I gazed out the window at the glittering Los Angeles skyline, lights flickering on across the city, I felt a deep, unshakable sense of empowerment. This wasn't just about money. This was about showing that truth, intelligence, and courage could triumph over concealment, favoritism, and doubt. I whispered quietly, almost to myself. We stood tall, we proved them wrong, and we reclaimed not just what was mine, but respect, dignity, and the power to inspire others. The city outside buzzed on, oblivious to the storm we had turned into a wave of recognition, but inside, I felt a calm, triumphant clarity. My allies, my family, and I, all part of a story that transcended a single bonus. This victory had become a statement. Strategy, preparation, and integrity were unstoppable forces. That night, I posted a brief, subtle acknowledgement on my personal LinkedIn, a professional note thanking colleagues for support, framing the story as a lesson in transparency and diligence. Within minutes, notifications poured in, hundreds of likes, comments, and messages from other Black women, young professionals, and mentors across the country, resonating with the story, inspired by how a Black woman had navigated corporate injustice with intelligence, precision, and dignity. I closed my laptop, sat back on my couch, and for the first time in months, let myself breathe deeply, feeling the weight of tension lift, replaced by an overwhelming sense of pride. My mother peeked in with a smile, my father quietly nodded from the other room, and I knew this wasn't just a personal victory. It was a moment that would ripple through family, friends, and community. I had fought for justice, and justice had been served. And in that triumph, I felt the raw, authentic, unshakable power of truth, strategy, and courage. It's all building to this moment. Don't blink. 7s. I learned something that no bonus, no title, and no recognition can ever teach you. And it's a lesson I hope every young Black woman, every professional, and every dreamer carries with them. Sitting on my balcony that evening, the Los Angeles skyline glowing in the distance, I reflected on the journey, the hidden bonus, the confrontation, the internal exposure, the ripple that spread through my office, my network, and my family. What struck me most wasn't the money or even the recognition. It was the undeniable truth that preparation, strategy, courage, and integrity could transform injustice into empowerment. My mother's words echoed in my mind. Money doesn't matter as much as honor and dignity, baby girl. And she was right. Every late night spent double-checking numbers, every careful draft of emails and presentations, every ally I sought. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself and my community that we could rise above concealment, favoritism, and doubt. I realized that when you operate with intelligence, honesty, and calm determination, your actions don't just resolve a single problem, they ripple outward, inspiring others, shifting culture, and creating space for fairness. And that's what I want young Black women, professionals, and anyone facing workplace challenges to know. The world may try to hide your value, your contributions, your worth. But when you stand firm, document carefully, seek truth, and act strategically, justice is not only possible, it becomes inevitable. The bonus was the spark, but the real reward was empowerment, dignity, and the ripple of inspiration through colleagues, friends, family, and community. I looked at my phone, messages pouring in from women across the country, mentors, friends, strangers, all thanking me for showing them what courage, preparation, and integrity could look like in action. I smiled, thinking of my mother, my father, my community, and all the young professionals who would watch this story, learn from it, and stand taller because someone dared to fight fairly and wisely. And I whispered quietly, keep your integrity, trust your preparation, fight for your worth, and never forget, the ripple of truth is stronger than any concealment. Thanks for listening. If this story spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that inspire and empower.